Hello, everyone. Welcome and thank you for joining us on today's webinar, How to Build and Lead Diverse Teams That Drive Business Growth. My name is Katie, and I'll be kicking things off for us today. So let's start with some introductions. Our presenters today are Carolyn Hass, Ph.D., VP of Product and R&D at SuccessFinder. An operations executive and thought leader in the HR technology space, Carolyn owns the end-to-end product lifecycle at SuccessFinder, driving corporate strategy execution through the design and development of data-driven tech solutions. She is also a master trainer and facilitator, building on extensive experience as a consultant, focusing on the topics of self-awareness for professional growth and leadership development. Carolyn holds master's and PhD degrees in industrial and organizational psychology from the University of Montreal. And Claude Werder, SVP, Principal HCM Analyst at Brandon Hall Group, will be our other presenter. For those of you that aren't familiar with Brandon Hall Group, we are a research and analyst firm that empowers excellence in organizations around the world through our research and tools. A quick mention that we currently have several certification programs open for enrollment, including our Certified Learning Strategist program. You can visit certification.brandonhall.com for more information. Your participation in our surveys is one of the most crucial components for our research. So if you have a few minutes to spare and see any topics that you can take a survey for, it's greatly appreciated. Links will be available in your handout, or you can always visit www.brandonhall.com. All participants receive a piece of complimentary research once the results are analyzed. A few important logistics we like to cover. This presentation is being recorded. The playback will be provided to everyone within 24 hours of the webinar in a follow-up email. If you would like to ask a question, please do so by typing it into the question box for our presenters. If you would like to download a copy of the presentation instantly, you may find it in the handout section. Lastly, we would like to extend a thank you to SuccessFinder for sponsoring today's webinar. SuccessFinder is a Canadian HR empowerment platform delivering hyper-relevant people data for confident HR business decisions across the employee lifecycle, from predictive hiring to talent management. This barcode is a visual cue in their branding to help illustrate that people are complex and unique individuals. They do not classify them into a handful of color groups, but rather they capture and decode that complexity to deliver confident, predictive people data. Their mission is to unlock opportunities for individuals and organizations to achieve their full potential every time. Without further delay, I'll pass it over to Claude so we can dive right in.
Thank you, Katie, and welcome everybody. Thank you to Carolyn and SuccessFinder for sponsoring our webinar today. And we're really excited to talk about this topic. We're going to start by Brandon Hall Group research on the importance of teams, trends in team development, and barriers to success. And we also want to review the different types of teams and the qualities that make for high-performing teams. Then we're going to drill down into team selection and design and success strategies for selecting and developing high-performance teams. So we're going to cover a lot of ground here. We encourage you to share any observations or questions as we go. We may take some as we go, but we'll definitely leave time at the end to field questions toward the end of the hour. So let's move right into it to look at some of our research. You know, we really feel at Brandon Hall Group that teams are the future of work. We've conducted many studies over the past couple of years that directly and indirectly focus on teams. And whenever we look at development priorities, learning priorities, team development and team leadership rank at or near the top, really whenever we ask about it. This research study is our major team study from late last year, in which 77% of organizations say that at least half of their work is now accomplished through teams. 86% of organizations said that the use of teams will increase over the next few years. Just as importantly, as the other data point shows, the majority of employers surveyed said that teamwork is mostly going to be done virtually. That creates a whole different dynamic. So what this means is that the workplace and economy continue to evolve, more business results will be achieved through dynamic teams. But these will not be the kind of teams that we believe most organizations are operating with now, which are often more groups of individuals, not really functioning like a true team. The teams that employers need in order to be successful are agile, they're multi-generational, multicultural teams, where everyone will lead or follow depending on the objectives of the team or the task and the synergies required for success. The teams will form, in our view, and disband more rapidly as business needs change, and team leaders will have to collaborate, flex their styles, and relate to a wide range of people, and have team members prepared to do the same. So what we hope you'll consider today as you participate in the webinar is kind of take a look at, are you ready for the future of teams? And we're going to be presenting a lot of information that can help you take the next steps, whether you're doing a pretty good job and just want to get a little bit better, or if you're just at the beginning of your journey. So moving to the next slide, what the research tells us is that many organizations are not as ready for the future of teams as they would like to be. About half of the people we surveyed say their level of readiness is low. And what that means is, of that 49%, about 15% describe themselves as really having teams that operate just as groups of individuals with inconsistent behaviors and communication. Leadership and goal setting are inconsistent. There's really no governance. So it's really just a group of individuals coming together. Another 34% of that 49% said they're beginning to take a more strategic approach toward team development, but they're still early in their journey. They're beginning to look at assessing behaviors needed for successful collaboration. They're beginning to make efforts to increase communication and collaboration and set specific team objectives. Then there's another group that's not shown on the slide, about 40%, that has put some training in place and really beginning to make some real strides. Are creating team charters and defined roles and responsibilities. And then there's a very small group at the top of our maturity model, about 11%, that feel like they have a really fully mature team ecosystem where members understand their roles and trust each other to operate within team norms and objectives. So notably, as a percentage on the right of this slide shows, almost 2/3 of organizations, which then includes organizations whose teams are more mature, right? So even the teams are doing a little bit better, said their team development efforts are ineffective in preparing for the future of teams. So Carolyn is going to be showing us some strategies today that we think can really improve team development. But before we get to that, we want you to weigh in on the importance of teams in the future of work and answer a quick poll question for us. And the question is pretty straightforward. Which of the following best describes why teams are important for the future of work? Is it the teams generate better ideas? Teams solve problems faster? Teams make work more satisfying and engaging? Teams promote learning and development? Or all of the above? And so it's interesting when we ask this question because teams have a lot of benefits, but what I've noticed in my research is that people who are running teams or work with teams don't necessarily think they generate better ideas or solve problems faster because they're really not working well as a team, and there's a lot of conflict and friction. And so it's always interesting to see what people say about this. And Peter, you let us know when we've got a representative sample, and then we'll take a look. There we go. So, well, this is great. Said all of the above. So that's wonderful. So that's really the answer we're looking for. But sometimes it doesn't work that way because, like I said, not everybody has a good experience with teams. But teams obviously are very important. And you obviously have a strong understanding that all of these things can be benefited by great teamwork. So let's move on now to Carolyn to talk to a little bit about the different types of teams. Welcome, Carolyn.
Thank you so much. I'm still seeing the poll results.
Apologies, everyone. Just one moment. All right.
There we go. So one of the things that's a nice place to start, because we all agree teams are really important. We all agree they're increasing in importance, but we thought it would be interesting to kind of level set on, not all teams are created equal. Not all teams have the same goals or purpose or even format in terms of the people that make it up. So just a quick overview of what is a team. And maybe you'll identify a bit more what the majority type of team is in your organization. We have some percentages up here from surveys done by Brandon Hall. Many of the teams that you might be used to are a functional work team, like a sales team, a marketing team, a software development team on the top left, where there's a team leader that manages a group of people who all have the same sort of, work in the same department. And that's pretty popular. More and more, we're seeing project teams that are a bit more cross-functional, so not mutually exclusive, but where you have different people who come together for a period of time for a specific project or goal or objective, and they're going to typically be a bit more multidisciplinary, which is very interesting too for the diversity of the members and people coming together for a short time that might not know each other very well, and that might disband, and frequently you'll see these kinds of mixes popping up. So that's kind of interesting to see what the differences might be there versus your functional work group that you typically work with. Another thing that's really important that I always like to ask, previous slide, please, that I always like to ask is this really a team or is it more of a work group? So for many of you, you might notice that you have a team that really is a team. We have interdependent tasks. We all work together, that blue image on the bottom left quadrant. You really see that it's an interdependent team. What we do, we have to work together. We really collaborate often. Everything we do is a function of how the team works together. But you might have more of a work group where everyone kind of reports into the leader, but we have different roles. We have different jobs, different expertise. So we don't really work together that often, but we're all on the HR team, for example. So that can also make a difference in terms of how we work together, how much we work together, how often we have to meet and collaborate, how important collaboration is for us when we don't have many shared projects in common. So these are some factors to think about when you think of what does this team need in terms of development. Kind of depends on their starting point and the mix that they have. So a few other things to consider on the bottom right. Is this a new team with a lot of new members? Is it a new leader managing this team? Is this a team of leaders or managers versus a team of individual contributors? Those are things to consider too in terms of the mix and diversity around the table and how the team will work together and what they have to do.
So yeah, moving on to the next slide here, that's a lot of different types of teams, and every team is individual. So there's a lot of complexity, and we're going to be talking about that. So, but no matter the type of team we're talking about, there are several indicators of high performance. According to our research, the most important indicator by a few percentage points is trust and mutual respect among the members. And it's also probably the hardest to come by. It doesn't occur just by bringing talented individuals together. Great teamwork is not in most people's DNA. It takes training and practice. What we found is trust and respect, to a large degree, are an outcome of many or all of the other indicators in this graphic, from shared experiences and purpose, clear goals, accountability, continuous learning, etc. From our research and with organizations in all industries and companies of all sizes, we've learned that high-performing teams occur when the following are present. One, where members understand their roles and as the graphic says, trust each other to operate within team norms and objectives. Two, where there's governance in place, norms, rules, guidelines, and technology to collaborate virtually and between team members. Also, team members give each other feedback and recognition and celebrate success, and enables continuous learning and improvement. And also, the teams are meeting business objectives and becoming a competitive differentiator in the marketplace. All of that makes a high-performing team. So now Carolyn is going to drill down a little bit more and provide some some deeper explanation.
Yeah, so there's a long list of indicators of team performance that we can look at. I like to break it down into 3 key areas. I think that helps kind of keep a focus on where is our target in terms of theme. So I've kind of reorganized the graph under the 3 themes you see here. So one of them is, what are the indicators that affect team cohesion, which is really how do these people work together? So if you're newly formed team, as you mentioned, trust and mutual respect don't show up day one, especially if these people don't know each other well, and it's the most important thing. So that can take a lot of time to develop, maybe not enough time for a team that disbands quite quickly, but it's such an important indicator for performance. Same thing for how we communicate together, how we embrace our differences. It's really going to be the mix and the flavor of the team when they get together and how they work together and how they interact and even get along, which is going to be really important. Another one is team effectiveness. This is really, the team objectives. What does this team have to do? You mentioned there can be a team charter, there can be, a specific project we're coming in to work on. That's really important, is do we have the skills and the diversity set around the table to do what we need to do, or is there a big gap in terms of what we're trying to do and who we have around the table? So, being able to establish those clear goals that tied to what we're here to do, and even flexibility and adaptability as we slowly work towards those objectives is going to be really important from the mix of team members around the table of how do we get where we're trying to go. And the final ingredient, of course, is team leadership. This is the person that's going to be encouraging the right behaviors and supporting the team to achieve their goals. So one of the key indicators of performance for a team, shared vision and purpose. Well, the team leader is the guide for a lot of this. Same for encouraging that continuous learning culture. The person who's leading the team is going to be really facilitating that ideally. And like we said, there's a lot of development for a team and for the team leader that's going to be important to make sure that that's the focus of what the team leader does. And one of the Brandon Hall surveys also mentioned that this is one of the top 3 investment priorities is leadership development. So we see that this is really where a lot of the focus lies because it has such a big impact on the other 2.
But here's the thing. Team leadership training is always at the top of the list. In fact, we just finished a leadership study, and team leadership ranked #1, even more important than frontline managers. However, when you look at the data, when you ask people who are they training on collaborating or leading teams, a relatively small percentage, especially considering the priority of leadership training, a relatively small number of organizations are actually training leaders at all levels. Now, the good news is that most organizations are more often going to be training employees at the manager, director, and individual contributor level to be team leads, which seems right to us, right? The more proximal you are to the team, the better off you are in terms of getting some impact on team leadership. This is the people that are really going to be more often in the position of being team leaders for the variety of teams that we talk about. So this has 2 the other thing I wanted to mention was one of the trends I'm seeing in team leadership is the creation of team lead positions. I'm seeing this in a few clients we have right now where they've instituted team leads, and the team leads kind of bridge the gap between line employees and a functional manager in a functional work team, for instance. So these managers often have many responsibilities under a lot of pressure. And one of the things we found is that they really struggle to collaborate and communicate with their team members as much as they would like. So the team lead can provide kind of a stepping stone to management and enables employees with stronger team building capabilities to transition while also making this important contribution to really collaborating with the team. And secondly, it creates a deeper commitment to team leadership and enablement and removes some of that burden from the manager. Now, we're not seeing this a lot yet, but some of the award-winning entries in team leadership in the Brandon Hall Group Awards focus specifically on reorganizing traditional leadership to focus more on leading teams. Because team leadership is complex, because the mission and objectives of each team are different and require a customized approach. So we want to ask you one more poll question to get your sense of some of these team leadership issues. So in your opinion, which of the following best describe the biggest barriers to a team's success? Now, we don't have an all of the above this time, and we realize that some of these barriers, there might be multiples, but we'd like you to give a crack at what you think of these 5 things is the biggest barrier. Is it poor communication, poor leadership, lack of trust, lack of alignment, or lack of diversity? We'll give you a couple of minutes. This is another interesting question. And again, we understand that in real life it's more than one, but we're interested in your opinion in that if you had to name one, what would be the thing that's most critical to you? Okay, do you let us know?
Will do, Claude.
And then we're really going to provide some solutions for you, some strategies for moving forward here.
I'm going to go ahead and close the poll. Oh,
okay.
We're getting a couple last minute ones in.
Okay. Oh, so it's a pretty interesting split, and we could talk about these all day, Carolyn, I think. But
definitely.
The tie is for poor communication and lack of trust. Is number one. Poor leadership is second, and then fewer people talked about lack of alignment and lack of diversity. I think it's really interesting, and I would have probably picked lack of trust, but the interesting thing about this is lack of trust has a lot of reasons behind it, right? A lot of it could be poor communication, a lot of it could be lack of alignment, but the end result is if you don't have trust, if people don't really believe in each other and that they're all trying to achieve the same goal, I think that is a huge impact on teams. Carolyn, your take on this?
Yeah, I think it's very interesting. I think it has to do also with the way we're interacting together. We talked about teams being very virtual, and especially teams that are newly formed. Like, trust doesn't come overnight, and there's a lot of reasons why it takes a bit of time to build trust. You don't know the competence of the other person. You don't know them well. You don't know their skills. You don't really know how much you can lean on them. And I think there's a lot of strategies that you can put in place to learn more about the people around you to really accelerate that. That's the most important thing, is how fast can we build that trust when teams don't have much time to kind of kick it off, because it has so many benefits to how they're going to work together.
Okay, let's move on now, and we're gonna focus on some examples of team profiles and how they influence outcomes. Okay.
Yeah, so in the next section of the webinar, we're going to talk a little bit more about establishing a team profile and understanding a little bit how that mix works. But maybe just to come back to some of those key performance indicators, we talked about trust, talked about communication. There's ways that you can know this beforehand, right? You have a group of people who are coming together to work. You can understand a little bit more. Well, what's their natural style in terms of communication? Are they strong communicators? Are they good at articulating their thoughts or at voicing their opinion? Are they more shy? Depending on the type of team, you have people who are not as open to sharing their thoughts or to raising their hand when something goes wrong. So those styles can have a big impact on how seamless the communication is in your team. It really depends on the people around the table. Same thing for things like trust and mutual respect. Well, that depends on how naturally engaged in teamwork people are. Are they really interested in teamwork? Are they interested in getting to know their teammates because they're naturally very friendly? So we have competencies like building social connections. Is that something that you like to do with the people that you work with? Or are you more the type to say, no, these are my work, these are my work colleagues. I'll get to know them as much as I need to. Those are all things that can really change the way the team interacts and how quickly they get to know each other, and even how much time they invest in that. Other things too in communication that's sometimes tricky to build trust is maybe there's some people who are a little more sensitive, to giving feedback, to receiving feedback. Maybe there are some people who don't always say things with as much tact or diplomacy as they could. And you can see that people who don't know each other very well, that can already lead to friction from day one, when in fact, there's a lot of good intentions behind that. So learning a little bit more about who do you have around the table, how can we learn this about each other, gain a bit of awareness as a team, that can go a long way in terms of accelerating, how much they understand each other and how quick they'll be like, oh, okay, well, I know you're like that, so that'll kind of help me communicate with you a certain way. Same for team effectiveness. If a team has to establish clear objectives and goals, well, I don't know if you've ever been on a team where not everyone is great at establishing goals, right? Not everyone is super structured, really has a game plan. Let's build this project status tracker. Who's keeping it up to date? Depending on the type of team, some teams don't have anyone around the team who's really that organized, or operates a little more informally. And then, following up on action items, making sure that responsibilities and roles are really clear. It depends on the type of people around the table, and if someone's kind of the keeper of that, or if kind of have no one who's catching those balls, that can really change how clear your goals are. Same for flexibility and adaptability. You have some people who, once the plan is set, I don't want to change it. I want clear expectations of me, and I want to just kind of put my head down and go. That's going to change a little bit how you adjust course, how you discuss the fact that the course needs to be adjusted, how agile your team is. It really depends on how agile each of the members are to change how they do things. Even in terms of kind of discussing a change and having to take a decision together as a group. If you're an interdependent team, you sometimes raise issues and then you have to make a decision. Well, this depends on the mix of people around the table. Are they more accommodating? I'll go with whatever the group wants is fine. Are they maybe a little bit more assertive? They'll push back if they don't feel like it's the right decision. And then you have kind of the people in between who try to negotiate a win-win. Let's compromise, let's listen to each other. Depending on who you have around the table, those discussions, those are critical moments in a team on how they make decisions when they have to adapt to, something external or something changing. That's the most important thing for them to keep moving forward towards their objectives. Finally, for the team leader, well, of course, the team leader's style and how they are is going to change a lot of whether or not they're going to be able to establish that shared vision and purpose or encourage a continuous learning culture. A lot of the questions around who is the team leader, who's best placed to do this, will depend on, how do they approach leadership? Are they more decisive? They want to take control. They want to be in charge. Are they more empowering to the, want to decentralize that decision-making power and be more of an influencer? Do they facilitate consensus-oriented conversations, or do they just want to, take decisions, move on? Let's keep this going. So their amount of patience and openness to those kinds of dialogue and constructive debate that has to happen for teams to move forward is going to be really important. Another really important one for facilitating that continuous learning culture, and we're seeing this a lot in teams that have to be more agile, is what's their tolerance for mistakes? Do they strive for excellence? Are they more perfectionist themselves? They want to get the best result the first time, and they don't have a high tolerance to the risks that are inherent to a more flexible and agile approach. So even for themselves, they might struggle to stay in that fostering discovery and learning mentality if they're really more of a let's get it right the first time. And it depends on the team. Some teams, have to be a bit more focused on that, but it's important to see the person who's, encouraging the right behaviors. Well, it's going to depend a lot on their own sense of high performance. So, even their own learning orientation, their own level of an agile mindset is going to foster what they promote in their team. So you can see already that the mix of people around the table is going to largely help see, what are the indicators of performance that are going to struggle the most, and if we heard from the poll that communication and trust are some of the ones that can be the most problematic, you can already see that, well, there's some things we should maybe try to understand beforehand to really understand how this team is gonna, how we're gonna be able to get them to their most successful.
I think there's a lot of, this is such a complex thing when you start talking about it. And I remember listening to a podcast a couple of weeks ago, and they were talking about the legendary Pixar animation studios. And when the CEO of Pixar took over, they were a little team and they hadn't had much success. And he picked people who were creative, but the most important thing to him was resilience, because he believed that animation is an incredibly difficult project, and you never hit it right the first time. It takes version after version after version. So he wanted people who were willing to fail and who were going to be okay failing and being able to build and learn from their mistakes and keep iterating and iterating and iterating. And that was really the key to their success. You know, he said, you know, as good as these animators were, the first version of their film was terrible and it's barely watchable. But they had to build on each other and help each other. And so that leadership, that cohesion, that trust all come together to really come together as almost this magic formula that allows teams to move forward and create great work.
Absolutely, and we're seeing that a lot in terms of more traditional organizations that are trying to implement agile practices and build agile teams in their organization. They're going from, for example, a financial institution, typically pretty risk averse. You know, not everywhere is very tolerant of mistakes, but they know they have to be more agile as a business to be able to meet, you know, the evolving world that they're operating in. But you can't just get people to switch to an agile mindset overnight, right? These teams that have been functioning a certain way, the leaders that pride themselves on delivering excellence, suddenly you're telling them try and fail fast, and you know they're not ready for that. They're not ready for that. And I can use myself as an example. I'm really, you know, a little bit of a perfectionist. I focus on details, and I tried to make this shift with my team to be more agile, and it required a lot of lessons and awareness on my part to really, you know, trust in the try mentality and to be prepared for, you know, it's going to take us maybe a bit longer. We're going to go at this in an iterative way. I had to unlearn a lot of things that I prided myself on in how I managed my team, and I had to learn new approaches. And also I saw the benefits of it as soon as I started putting it into practice, but I can't say that, you know, it was always super comfortable for me, or it was something that I just knew how to do from day one. I had to really, you know, develop a lot of skills around that. So the next section, we're gonna share a little bit more about some of the ways that you can approach developing high-performing teams. We're going to focus obviously on assessment, which is something that SuccessFinder does. But some of the things that, you know, we know are an important way for you to approach this if you're looking for some tips is to take a look at, we can go to the next slide. Some of the ways we want to approach this last leg of the presentation is to talk about strategies. What can you do about this, right? So some of the strategies that come out of the Brandon Hall research is to create a culture of continuous learning, to communicate the importance in participating in teams to build the skills for advancement. And really important, something we're going to talk about is assessing prospective team members to help with the selection of people with complementary skills, to understand the gaps that you might have in your team, some of the things we've been mentioning, to really be able to harness an understanding of the people that you're going to put together and to be able to focus your development efforts in the right place. There's no point, you know, adopting just a broad, you know, team development strategy. There's a lot of this that you can really dive into. And as we know, teams are the future. There's going to be more teams. You have to prepare for the readiness. So we'll, in the next few slides, we'll share some tips on how to do this. So just really quick, so that as we talk about some examples, that you understand what SuccessFinder does. So our focus is we use psychometric assessments to try to understand the team members in place. So to really leverage insights that can help you, you have to understand the people in front of you. And as you mentioned, what we do is we try to provide those insights to our clients, the most relevant insights. And if you're not used to using assessments in your organization, or you use some, but you're not really sure how they can apply to this context, it's always good to understand, well, what can assessments give us? We like to say less instinct, more insight. So instinct can help you in a certain way, but there are some limitations for what it can provide you. So one of the first things that assessments can provide is it just allows you to see more things that are difficult to observe. If we said that, you know, communication and trust are so important, but they take time to kind of reveal themselves, this is a way to get that information maybe a little earlier. If you assess the people on the team, you might get a sense of their communication style, or of some of the ways that they approach relationships with team members. That can be a great way to capture what might be difficult to observe from day one and give you some information beforehand. Always a pretty good benefit to bringing extra data to the mix. a really important one that should not be discounted, with the idea of, yes, you might say, oh, I have a good read on people, I have a good way of knowing kind of how things are, or I have an applied, a framework that I like to use that should work in all contexts. The most important thing is to make sure that your approach is inclusive. So there are unconscious biases that exist. So how you perceive your team, what you think is going to go well when you bring on a new team member, who you think is going to fit. It's always good to back that up with an additional source of data, just to see if there are some assumptions that you hold that could be challenged with additional information. And the most important thing to assessments is they can provide you some data. And what's nice is the second you have data, you can start to relate data to important outcomes. So you can actually see if we make these changes, if we understand these things, are we actually getting better results? Do we have teams that are more successful, teams that are more engaged, that reach their objectives faster? So something to think about. It's not to replace what you're doing now, it's to add an additional objective data source that could really just help you gain more clarity and make better decisions.
Yeah, and I do a lot of research on assessments, and organizations seem to have kind of a love-hate relationship with them. And when we ask people if it's about leadership and what should be done before leadership training, 95% of organizations say there should be some sort of assessment, but far fewer organizations actually do it. And I think hopefully what Carolyn's going to share today is to make sure everybody's kind of comfortable about what is measured and how is it measured, because it can be such a huge advantage and tool, and not enough organizations are leveraging assessments on a consistent basis, I don't think.
Absolutely, and I think the key message here is to not think of them so much as an evaluation. It's just an additional data point, and the most successful organizations are data-driven organizations that are tracking key metrics for success. And I think the important rise in HR in occupying more and more of a strategic position in an organization is, can they provide measurable data points that can really help understand the success of their initiatives, right? If you want to do a leadership development, you have to be able to show that pre-post there's an improvement in your leader's development on key metrics. So you need a starting point. Assessments can help you give that starting point. It can help you have, more language to talk about some of this in your organization, and that can give the leaders of the organization a much broader picture of what you're doing and how successful it is, and what are the key areas that you're focusing on. And even from an analytics perspective, you can hone in on areas that really need your attention more than others. So again, to challenge some assumptions and bring some strong KPIs to the table. That's the kind of language that can take, a leadership development initiative from something that you're doing to, something that's really meant to move the needle on some of the business metrics that really matter. So for SuccessFinder, our goal in this whole, what I just mentioned, is to provide really relevant data and to provide a lot of data. So as we mentioned when we presented our company, we're not interested in giving you some high-level types. Oh, you're a blue, you're a green. We really want to capture the complexity of people to have some really interesting and very precise insights to be able to share. So we capture 120 data points on each individual who does the assessment. We want to capture that complexity, not reduce it. And then our platform just decodes it into types of natural behaviors that are easy to understand. So you'll see the goal is not that you become a data analytics guru. It kind of packages them neatly into competencies, behavioral competencies that you can understand and that are really relevant for success. So we have 26 competencies that comes from the areas we measure. And then you can start to read this data and understand, okay, what can I learn about the people around the table? So for teams, it's really interesting. How does this person show up for a leader? How do they approach problems? What motivates and drives them? How do they interact with and influence others? Very important for trust and communication. So you start to gain some insight into these areas that can help you with everything from who should, in a hiring decision, who's the right fit, not just for the role, but for the team, for the mix that we're bringing on. And even in terms of selecting the right team leader, if we open up to these new positions that are being created, who's the best place to fit with the requirements of this leadership role from a standpoint of the way they operate, their natural preferences. So we talked on the next slide. So this is just to give you a bit of an idea of well, what do I do with this assessment? What do I do with this kind of information? This is just something that you can easily put into practice if you bring in assessments, is you can use them in what we call a team alignment exercise. If we're talking about team development, I don't believe that there's just one framework that makes all teams more effective. I think it depends on the mix of the team and what they have to do. So a team alignment exercise kind of starts with a bit of self-awareness. Let's start with each of the individual team members, give them a feedback on their profile, what stood out on some of those questions I mentioned, what motivates and drives you, what's your approach to teamwork, how do you show up as a leader? And they get some feedback and insight on their own profile and their contribution to the team. What do I bring to the team in terms of strengths, and what are some of the things that, don't really do it for me in terms of teamwork I should work on? And then when you present that to the group, so you have a workshop, for example, where you're going to have the team come together and talk about some of the key aspects of their profile, you start to build trust just there, because already I'm learning about the people around the table. Oh, I didn't know we were both super perfectionists, who love to ask questions. That's good to know about you. I can lean in on this about you. You also see people who might have some complementary strengths to you. So you start to learn more about, oh, I can maybe, tap on you if I have a question about this, because it's really not natural for me. Or when I need ideas, I'm going to go to the person who's super creative. And that's something that can be really great, because you instantly get to know, who's around the table. You start to build trust in their competence and what they can deliver. Even if you haven't spent much time with them yet, you already know where their strengths are, and you can already start to leverage them more. And then from a cohesion perspective, you're going to also see your team kind of from a distance and say, okay, collectively, do we have areas where we're all similar? These are our team strengths. This is the flavor of our team. These are the things that we bring, and that's going to really help us succeed. Similarly, we might have some collective team gaps. I mentioned before, what if no one around the team is very organized? So we never really follow up on our action items. No one writes down what we talked about in a meeting, and every meeting we kind of start fresh. I don't know if you've ever been on a team like that. I have. And that can be really interesting in terms of how do we move towards our objectives if no one's really following up on objectives. So you can discuss your collective strengths and maybe some of the gaps that you have around the team. And the final piece is, how do we bring this all together towards what we have to do? Where should this team focus their efforts? How do we stay aligned? How do we stay focused on what we have to do? What do we need to put in place to make sure that we connect more as a team? How do we want to communicate better as a team? These are things that you have to establish as a team. And it's nice to not just put, blanket generality statements to what you have to do as a team, but to go very precise for what this team needs to succeed, and to have that very concrete. So this is the kind of exercise that doesn't take too much time to do. Everyone does the assessment, gets a bit of feedback on their results. Then you do a workshop. It can be 2 hours, it could be 4 hours. Already the team should be getting together for specific reasons. It's an occasion to do this. We have some teams that do this once a year, and then they do kind of follow-ups and check-ins, especially if there's a big change to the team or it's a newly formed team. It's a great way to kick off the team working together. It really accelerates how they're going to work together.
And I would go so far as to say, Carolyn, tell me if you agree, that just going through that process, taking the assessment and going through the data like you just described, can build trust and cohesion in itself, because you're looking at real information. You're not going off somebody's, opinion. You're going over real information, and you're openly talking about it. And so I think that leads to a lot of the team building that you want. Just being able to take that data, leverage it, talk about it, and see, the different roles people have to play and where their strengths and development areas are.
Absolutely. I've done many of these when I was a consultant. It's always a positive experience. And you can also tell there are some teams that they want to take more time on this. It's almost like, you've given them permission to talk a bit more about what it's like, what the experience of being on this team is like, and how to optimize it versus staying in the, the operational, the tactical. And I've seen a lot of teams that rarely get together at all. And that's one of the things. They're like, oh, we've been a team, for about 6 months. We've never really spent this much time together. And that's something that you can see has huge benefits. Everyone feels the benefits just from taking some time and focusing on the team itself, which it sounds intuitive, but putting it into practice, you just have to take the time to do it. So when you look at a team profile, it's not, again, you don't need complex analytics experience to be able to understand a team heat map. You're going to look at a few things. What are our collective strengths, areas where we're all the same? Collective gaps, areas where we don't really have a champion around the table who can represent this area, and maybe we have a blind spot as a team, something that we're missing that's going to really help us achieve our goals. What are some complementary areas? Can I learn a little bit about my team members to say, okay, we're kind of covered. There's always a voice around the table to represent this area that's going to be important. And then what I like to call the split, and that can sometimes lead to disagreements in a team, is when half of your team has a very specific style and the other half of the team is very different. So you often clash on the same kind of areas because you really come at the problem with such a different perspective, and there's like two groups in the same team, and it's hard for them to see eye to eye. So you're going to see some results on the following pages. I've put together a few examples of teams that I've worked with, and you'll see that the results are presented with what SuccessFinder measures, which is level of preference for these competencies that we're going to talk about. So the higher the preference for the competency, the more natural the behavior is. So it's more likely something that you're going to see around the table. And it doesn't take much effort for the team members to display these. It's already really their style, their natural approach to things. And you're going to see some lower preferences. So lower scores on these competencies, meaning they're less natural. So this is not something that's easy for this team member to do or for the team collectively to do. It's just really not their go-to strategy. So it could be an area that they're neglecting. So it's a good opportunity to look at it that way. So I'm going to start with an example. I love this example. This is team cohesion at its core for a team I worked with, which was a global HR team. So it was a newly formed team, and it's kind of a multidisciplinary team. When you have an HR team, everyone had a specialized HR function. So you had someone in comp and benefits, you had someone in talent acquisition, you had someone in talent management. So people had very different expertise, and they didn't know each other well, and they didn't really work together much on specific goals. They had kind of like their own areas of focus, their own objectives. So how were we going to build cohesion fast, right? Trust, communication, because what they wanted to do was learn from each other, see maybe beyond our functional expertise, there are things we can lean on each other for that are just related to our skills, and see how they could connect more as a group to really feel more like a team and to feel less like a work group, which was how they had kind of been feeling up until then. And like I said, it was a new team. So this was an acceleration exercise at the beginning of the team getting together. When you look at the team profile here, so you'll see there's a team leader column, and then there's other people who are on the team. There's a few things that are interesting when you look at it. When you think, okay, how is this team gonna build cohesion, build trust, build, communicate well? You wanna see how easy is it gonna be for them based on who they are. So what was nice is we saw there's a very consensus-oriented approach around the team. This is a team that's very likely to get along well, very accommodating, patient, they love to listen, they're all in HR, so they have a great people approach to things that's going to translate into their own team. So we looked at this and we said, it's not going to be hard for this team to work well together. They have a very accommodating approach and they focus on consensus. What was really interesting when we saw that building social connections, so naturally friendly, interested in developing close relationships with the people they work with, very high for the team, but actually not a focus area for the team leader. So it was interesting when I met this team was to say, okay, so maybe the team leader is not really promoting opportunities for this team to get together because they don't think you need that many. For them, it's already enough what they're doing. But what you're seeing is the rest of the team actually is looking for more opportunities to connect. There's something missing for them. They want to have very close ties to the people they work with. And we know that as soon as they do that, it'll be very easy for them to connect. But the team leader might not pick up on this need because they're very different from the rest of the team. And even, you see with exercising political influence, the team leader is looking at this with, these are, you have functional areas. This is the work group. We have time to touch base, but we're not here to be best friends. And yet you have the rest of the team that's like, no, I really want to have close relationships with the people I work with. Even if we don't have the same job, we should still, I want to feel close to them. This is a great way to say, okay, what can this team do? And we had great discussions on how frequently should they meet. They wanted to put in place maybe some informal opportunities for them to connect more frequently. It's simple things like that that you realize the team is craving and that can help them meet more often, but It's not driven by the leader. It's the last thing they're thinking of. So this was an opportunity for them to voice this and to also notice, wow, we're all so similar. It's not going to be hard to get to know you guys. You know, we're gonna be able to get close really fast. So it was also a check-in for the leader to say, okay, I need to focus on this more because this is what my team wants. You know, I can't deny it. It's what they want. Claude, any thoughts on that one before we move on? Oh, you're on mute.
Sorry, I was on mute. Yeah, you know, it's funny. I think this happens a lot, and a lot of times the leader kind of holds sway on this, and they don't get together as much because the leader is not as compelled, or there's a couple of people in the group that don't want it. And I think that connection, however people want to have it, is really important for a team to grow. So sometimes it can happen just within the meeting, but with a profile like this, if it needs more, you know, you've really got to respond in order to have that team meet the potential for cohesion.
Super. I'll go a bit faster because I'm seeing time fly. We have a team effectiveness example here. So this was a self-managed leadership team. So we were trying to assess, could this team be made up of a self-managed group of leaders rather than to report to the CEO? And so this was really related to team effectiveness. The objective of this team is to be able to approach the growth of the company, which was really, really important, to establish if a self-managed team could work. So this is really, let's put these people together and see if this is gonna be able to work. That's gonna mean establishing the decisional power of each member to really establish how they're gonna work together. So some of the things that we learned just in assessing them and assessing if this format could even work was to say, okay, they have a few things in common. They're all big conceptual thinkers that really focused on strategy. You know, they're the right people to be at the top, reflecting on the big questions regarding the company. But when it comes to growing the company, they all agreed that we had to focus on growth. But you'll see from pursuing competitive challenges here, big difference in what growth means. So for Lewis, you'll see that growth meant exponential growth. We want to double the company in 5 years. But then for Janice and Aisha, they were a little bit more into, no, like a steady incremental year-over-year growth. That's going to change all the decisions that they make together if they don't agree on what growth really means for the company and how much push you want to put in. All the decisions and disagreements, we could already see that they might come from a fundamental difference in how fast you want to go and how high or how far you want to go, and where the frustrations might come. Same thing on acting on some of those decisions. You have, you know, an approach to leading decisively that for some is, you know, let's make decisions, let's move forward, let's not hesitate to act. And then you have others who might be a little bit more reticent, a little bit more cautious. And then you see that, well, how are we going to move forward and get done when some people are still not sure of where they want to go or of calling the shot, and then others who are ready to move into action. For them to work well together, these are a lot of things that we could already see some friction points. So, you know, the previous example that I gave, you could see that the team, you know, just little tweaks and the team is going to work well. This is an example where we're throwing 3 people together and we're hoping that it works out well, but you can already see it might not work out that well. There might be some challenges. Do we want to address these challenges? Do we want to rethink the mix of people because we might not have enough complementarity? We might have too many differences that are really going to impact what the team is trying to do together. Maybe really quick, one last one is just to see for team leadership, how the team leader can also impact a little bit the team. We have at the top a sales team where you see that the team leader is very different from the rest of the team. This is a team leader who is really focused on maximizing profitability, on operating with a very fast go mentality, very, you know, thrives in chaos. Let's go fast, let's hit our targets, let's surpass our targets, and also very much interested in building social connections, a little bit the opposite from the first example I showed. Well, when you look at this, you're going to see a team leader that is very intense, right? A lot more intense on some of these areas than the rest of their team. And one of the things that's important to understand here when we think about, you know, fostering that area of continuous learning, making sure everyone's aligned, one of the biggest challenges we saw here is to make sure that people can follow this leader. If this leader is moving really fast, really intensely in one direction, at an intensity level that might be too much for their team, there's a chance that they struggle to really work optimally together when the team leader is always pushing a little bit too far, too fast, and not always making sure that, you know, they understand the people who are trying to follow them and some of the ways that they might struggle through that. Same for the software development team on the bottom. This is actually an interesting one where there may not be enough diversity on the team. So you have the team leader who, yes, has more of a leading decisively approach, which might be the reason, you know, often in software development teams, you have a developer who was promoted to the team leader because they were really great. But what we noticed too here was that they kind of kept approaching hiring with hiring people who were very similar to them. So there's a bit of a risk of groupthink if you don't have a team that's facilitating change or reflecting a bit more creatively about the technology strategy that they're approaching. And instead, they kind of keep hiring people who are very similar to them, similar-minded, who are going to work well together for sure because of these similarities, where you might not have enough diversity around the table to really drive the team forward. So these are just a few examples of that. I know we've taken up a lot of your time, maybe went a bit over, but want to leave time for questions.
Yeah, so I think the great thing about those examples is it just really illustrates the complexity of all this, and there's a balance and ebb and flow to every type of team, and so, you know, it's obviously teamwork is more important than ever. The team success depends on a lot of different factors, particularly cohesion, effectiveness, and leadership. But there's so many barriers to overcome, and assessments can help, but a lot of the other things we talked about as well. I want to jump to questions real quick, see if we can get one or two in real quickly, but I do want to also offer you some resources. I think some of you are expressing some interest here, and there's some reading from SuccessFinder that we list here, that when you get the deck, which we will be sending after the webinar, so you'll have access to all this. There are a couple of really good resources. And then we also urge you to reach out to team@successfinder.com or connect directly with Carolyn by reaching her on LinkedIn. We have the link there. So I know Carolyn would love to hear from everyone, and there's also great resources here for you to take the next steps. And one of the questions we have actually is, you know, how can an HR team that wants to make some progress here get started, get trained on some of these things that you've discussed, such as the heat map or the team profile? If you're starting from scratch, what are some good first steps to get started?
So obviously to book a demo with our team to understand a little bit more how it works, but I would say it's not a huge investment, right? You learn the competency framework and you start to bring assessments into your process. So I think you have to kind of take a look at your processes and what you're doing now, see how you can integrate assessments into the process, whether it's in your selection process to really get a, you know, be able to look at a whole team before you add someone to the mix to know what you're looking for can often be really important beyond their fit with the role. So we offer this competency-based training. It takes a day. It's 100% online, and then you'll already have some additional insights that you can bring into your conversations. And then, as I mentioned, it's just to take a look at how do I have this information ready when I'm trying to make some decisions. So it's not too much to get started. It's really probably a slight change to your process, and then a little bit of learning and development for your team to be able to interpret the results. But even though it's complex, I have to say it's also not that complicated. It's more like an additional information piece that you're just going to have for what you're already doing. It doesn't replace what you're doing. It's kind of an add-in to things you're probably already doing.
And it's great that you're interested too. And I think one of the things I found when we do advisory work with our clients is that it's great when HR can get the ball rolling and really take the lead on this. And so taking a step like understanding assessments and the heat maps and some of the tools, if you can educate yourself even at a you know, basic level at first, and then build on that, you can take that and really take the lead in driving the team development bandwagon in your organization. Because, like I said, everybody says the team leadership is important, but a lot of organizations have trouble getting started, team development and team leadership, but they have trouble getting started. This provides some really good tools for you to do that, and then you can take the lead and really be the people driving the team development process rather than waiting for others to drive it. So we're out of time. This has been great. Carolyn, thank you very much for this. This has been great. You've been great to work with. We hope you've enjoyed it. We have the resources that you can access, and we'll be sending the deck out. So we thank you for taking the time. Thanks SuccessFinder for sponsoring, and we hope to see all of you in a webinar with us again very soon. Thanks. Have a great rest of the week. Have a great holiday weekend for those of you in the States, and God bless. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks so much.
Bye-bye.